welcome to today's webinar from Masters Real Estate to Chartered Surveyor, Understanding the RICS Qualification Process. Thank you for joining us. It's a great opportunity to find out more about our online part-time Masters programme directly from the course director, Mark Shepherd. I'm Rebecca Evans, the course advisor. I'm here to support you through the application process. Phoebe, my predecessor, who some of you may already know from last year, she's supporting the webinar chat. So please do let us know if you have any questions on there or in the Q&A box, and we'll address them towards the end of the session. So here's a brief agenda for today. And if you're listening to this or watching back on YouTube, or if you have any further questions that we've not addressed, please email us on studyonline@manchester.ac.uk. So I've added some resources here for you to watch back, particularly the 17th of April webinar, What to Expect and How to Excel with Online Learning. It may have some questions, answers to the questions that you have, and you can find out more from our YouTube channel. So without further delay, Mark, it's lovely to have you here today. I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and get going with the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to see you. So as Rebecca's already said, my name is Mark Shepherd. I'm the Programme Director, which basically means I'm responsible for the academic leadership of the programme. So I take the overarching view where individual colleagues deliver specific elements. So if you have any questions about the content or specifics about the study of an individual unit, then I'm happy for you to email me. My email is there on the screen. It's probably more effective than phoning me at the moment, as my phone is currently being migrated and it's complicated, but it's easier to get hold of me by email. Let's leave it at that. Right, next slide, please. So the first thing I wanted to do was just introduce you to the programme team. Then I'll talk a bit about the programme structure. Then what often prospective students would like to know is how do they actually qualify as chartered surveyors? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then obviously I'm happy to take, or we're happy to take questions at the end. Okay, next slide, please. So who will be delivering what? I know you probably won't know who these folk are, but the reason I wanted to show you this slide was just to give you an idea that, we're quite a large team. And so within the team, we each deliver to our specialisms, so that you get a range of perspectives and a range of expertise during your period of study. Sorry, I was just distracted by my cat there. I closed the door to keep her out, and it turns out she's been hiding under the sofa. I study all the time. So I apologise if you see a tail going past the screen, you'll know what it is. Anyway, the key thing here is just to highlight a couple of examples. So you'll see me in the second unit that you study. So we will actually interact. I will be teaching you specifically along the way. And our project-based inquiry, which is our research project equivalent to a dissertation, but on a smaller scale, is being delivered by Professor Anna Pamananda, who's our head of research in real estate. So you are getting specialists in all these areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to take you through the programme structure a little bit so you understand how the different units fit together and what kind of study expectations there are. So you'll study each unit in sequence. I'll tell you more about that later, but essentially you'll only study one unit at a time until you get towards the end of the course. So you start with real estate markets, which is an introduction to real estate generally, to investment, to the occupation market. So it's quite a broad introduction to real estate context, actors, and so on, which will feed into my unit, which obviously I think is the most important unit, but that's my job, is property valuation, which is essentially about putting a price on our real estate assets, whether it's for rental, for purchase, for tax, whatever it is. Hopefully will give you some idea of what kind of things affect value. Then you'll move on to another pair of units. We tend to pair units up. So in this case, it's Future Cities, which is a combination really of town planning and intelligent cities and the future of urban environments, delivered and written by a combination of one of our professors and one of our specialist researchers who actually used to be driving some of these aspects for Manchester City Council. So you get both academic and practice. Oh, I did warn you the cat might appear. Her tail has just appeared. Let me turn my keyboard off so she doesn't type anything inadvertently. Right. And land and development is about the development process. It is essentially from inception to completion, the idea that, you know, you look at whether a project's viable, what kind of projects you might undertake, then you work through the financing and the financial calculations, and ultimately the disposal of the completed asset. So that's the first year. It's roughly 40 weeks of study in total, but I'll tell you more about that shortly. Okay, next slide, please, Rebecca. So in your second year, the first half is very similar. You study another 2 core units. They are real estate finance, which pretty much does what it says on the tin. It looks at direct and indirect methods of financing real estate. So not just sort of loans and such, but also, you know, corporate finance. It touches on real estate investment trusts and those sort of indirect investments. And that's paired with strategic asset management, which is essentially a unit about managing completed property. In other words, if you think of real estate investment finance as the strategy and the principles of investment, strategic asset management is more about, well, once you've got the property, what do you do with it? How do you make sure it achieves the best possible returns? So that's the first half of your second year. So essentially you've completed 6 taught units, and then you'll move on to the final phase. Now we call this the research phase, but it's essentially a mixture of an option and the project-based inquiry, which, as I said, is a bit like a dissertation, but is a bit smaller. So you get a choice of one of 3 options, which are currently real estate law in practice, which is primarily, but not exclusively, for UK students, because that's something that UK employers have told us they particularly want. Real estate modelling, which is a quantitative unit looking at different ways of modelling real estate markets and real estate transactions and so on. And then there's corporate real estate, which is essentially looking at real estate from the occupier's perspective. You know, if you're working for a large corporate that occupies a lot of property, how do you manage their assets to support their principal business activity, which probably isn't real estate? So you get a choice of those 3. Don't worry, we won't throw you in at the deep end. We'll give you a briefing on each one in plenty of time before we get to the point where you have to make a choice. But in tandem with that, you'll be working on your project-based inquiry. So while you're studying your option, you'll also be preparing the ground for your project-based inquiry. So you'll be thinking about your topic, you'll be coming up with ideas, you'll be thinking about where you're going to get your data from, you'll be getting ethical approval, so that in the, if you like, the final phase, which is essentially over the summer of your second year, you'll go full pelt into your project. Okay, next slide, please, Rebecca. So the taught credits are all 20 credits, which approximates to about 20 hours of study, although that does vary from student to student. There'll be some things you know more about, some things you know less about, but the basic principle is over 10 weeks, you'll complete roughly 200 hours of study, including the online material, assignments, and so on. The project-based inquiry is 40 credits, so it's a bigger unit, and that equates in theory to 400 hours of study, but you're studying that as an individual, and I'll talk more about that later. So each taught unit, so the first 6 core units plus the option, are all taught in blocks of 10 weeks, where essentially there's 8 weeks of taught material, together with a further 2 weeks to work on the final assessment, which always constitutes at least 50% of your final mark, and usually more. And obviously the tutors will be there to help you through that process. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So a few things to tell you about assessment. It is 100% coursework. So there are no formal exams. 1 or 2 units have online tests, but these are usually taken over a period of time. So they're not like your traditional, you know, you've got 3 hours, write everything you know about something. It's also 100% online submission. You don't have to come into the university to submit anything. So there are no written examinations. Most of the assessment is a combination of essays and reports with the occasional blog or wiki to make life interesting. At least we hope it makes life interesting. And typically for each unit, you will normally have 2 assessments. I think the only unit that currently deviates from that is my assessment. I have 3, but anyway, we'll come to that when we get to my unit at another time. But typically you'll get 2 assessments, a smaller assessment at the beginning and the majority assessment at the end. Okay, next one, please. So then we go on to the project-based inquiry, which is a 10,000-word research project on a topic of your choice. It is basically a small... If you've done a dissertation before, it will be very similar, but it's smaller, and also sometimes it can be more practice-based than a traditional dissertation is. And you will have support from an individual supervisor. So you'll have a specialist that you'll be working with to develop your ideas, your proposal, and your final project. So you'll be allocated a supervisor quite early on in that phase, once you've submitted your ideas and we've decided who's best to support you. Okay, next one, please. So that's everything I think about the course that I wanted to remind you of or mention to you. So the next one, a little bit about how to qualify with the RICS, or how the course fits within that overall RICS qualification experience. So if we could have the next one, please. So the way that things would work is that you would normally be expected to get an RICS accredited qualification, normally a degree, either undergraduate or postgraduate, and then complete at least 24 months of what the RICS calls structured training, which, as I've said here, is basically supervised experience, on-the-job training and CPD. So you'll be working under the mentorship, shall we call it, of someone within a real estate organization. Now, one of the really good things about this particular course is that, unlike full-time programs where it's assumed that you'll be studying full-time and therefore don't have time to work, if you're working in the real estate industry, there's every possibility that you complete your structured training, your supervised work experience, if you like, alongside your study of the real estate program. The only thing you can't do is take your final assessment until you've successfully graduated. So without wanting to labor the point, to give you an example, a student on our full-time program would do 12 months full-time and then would work for 2 years and then would take their final assessment. You would study part-time and undertake your experience part-time and sign up for the final assessment as soon as you got confirmation that you've successfully graduated. What's the final assessment? Well, actually, I've just been doing some of these assessments a few weeks ago. Essentially, they involve you setting out a summary of your experience, and the experience has to be mapped against competencies the RICS identifies. I won't bore you with the details, but essentially each pathway, each specialism has its own set of competencies, and they're graded at levels 1, 2, and 3. 1 is knowledge, which you hope will come from your program. 2 is application, doing things in practice. And 3, which you don't have to achieve for all of them, but some of them, is about giving strategic advice. So not just, for example, in my subject valuation, it's not just about producing a valuation report, but letting the client know about the implications of that valuation report. And what happens is you collect your experience over roughly 24 months. You then have to submit a case study, an example of the work that you've done, a record of your CPD, your continuing professional development. There are minimum requirements for that. And then you will have an interview, which is roughly 60 minutes, where you present on your case study, your questions on your case study, and then you're questioned about your summary of experience to make sure, I suppose, two things really. One is that you really have the experience that you said you've got. And secondly, in essence, to assess that you're fit to be let loose to practice independently if you want to. So what we're saying here is degree plus experience together will lead you to the final assessment. But just bear in mind that the 24 months is an average. Sometimes it can take a little bit more, just to make sure that you get to the right level in the required competencies. So but the big advantage, the big thing I like about the program is that you can do the two side by side. So it doesn't delay you in qualifying. In fact, at least in theory, you could be qualified as quickly or even more quickly, sorry, more cattails, than your full-time counterparts, but we won't tell them that. No, seriously, the point is it doesn't slow you down studying part-time. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Next slide, please.
I think this is just a little bit back over to me, so I'm not going to read this slide out, but what I would say is some of you have already applied and got your offers, so that's excellent to hear and see. If you've not already, I just want to add that due to the vocational nature of the course, appropriate professional experience will be considered and may be approved if satisfactory evidence of postgraduate study, research, or more likely professional experience can be provided, which a lot of you already have. And advice from the admissions team is to ensure that you upload all of the documentation listed. So I've put a little checklist here. And to make it easy for them and Mark to come to a decision quickly. Great. Now next slide for me. Again, in my role as the course advisor, I've pretty much done a literature review of the finance support here. These are the pages listed that I recommend you look up. Phoebe, I'll ask you to put them into the chat. They're the most useful ones I've found. For UK students, if you've not already completed a master's, you may be able to receive financial support from Student Finance England, Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. I recommend checking if there's something similar in your country if you're joining the cohort from afar. In addition, the early application deadline has been extended to the 24th of June. So to receive a 10% reduction on the tuition fee, if offered a place, you need to accept your offer within 2 weeks from the offered date to qualify for the discount. So I'll leave you to look at those slides, those links in your own time. Yes, and we're wrapping up quickly. We've come to the questions section. So we have had a few questions come in. We've had one from Mohammed, who wants to know how the course matches globally on a global scale, Mark.
Right. I'm not absolutely sure how to answer that in terms of matches. What I can say is that we designed it to be attractive to an international audience. So apart from the law unit I mentioned earlier, we've tried to make it international rather than UK centric. And certainly when I showed you the staff teaching on the program, I can tell you that, again, they are an international bunch. Let me think. Finland, India, Greece, those immediately spring to mind, but yes, so you get the idea. So if that's what you meant, then I would say we try and demonstrate principles that are applicable internationally. Not, we try not to make it too UK centric. As I say, the only perhaps outlier is real estate law, because it's been specifically designed for those students who want to practice in the UK, although you could undertake it if you wished.
Great, thank you. We have another question from
Yes.
Charles. He's a registered valuer, and he's just wondering, would he be able to qualify for an exemption to get to be a chartered surveyor quicker?
So I understand the question, but if he's already a registered valuer and already a member of the RICS, okay, then my answer to that, I suppose, is if you didn't have a degree but you had this qualification, it would be a good route into entry, but it wouldn't normally give exemption from individual units. I think that's the safest answer. But as your circumstances might be very specific, I'm happy to have a one-to-one conversation about that outside this particular meeting, because we might need to discuss your particular circumstances. But I'm happy to kind of give more detail on that. I feel a bit like a Bond villain sitting here straight, but there you go.
Thank you. We've had a question from Abby, and I can answer this one, Mark.
Okay.
Do we get a proper graduation in person? Yes, I'd say the online course is equal to the in-person course. You have access to the library resources, career service, disability service, and part of that, you will be invited to graduation in person. So yeah, that'd be great. But I really appreciate, as a University of Manchester graduate myself, the library service. They have packages like the My Essentials workshops. Maybe if you need a bit more studying up with the academic skills, they do such workshops, academic writing. So I'd recommend them and get involved as well. Great.
Totally agree.
Oh, so Mohammed, I do not have any background to real estate or quantitative surveying, but I am fascinated by the real estate industry and want to move my stream. Is this the right place to start? Go on, Mark.
100% yes. So this course is designed, well, I suppose with two groups in mind, but the original premise was people with no real estate knowledge or limited real estate knowledge who wanted to move into a career in real estate from another discipline. What seems to have happened over time is that group has formed a good proportion of the students coming on the program, but the other group that come on the program are those who have experience but not the qualification that they need to be able to progress in their career. So the simple answer is yes, it's a great point to start, but don't feel like you know, if you already have some real estate knowledge, I think you will still benefit from, well, one tends to specialize, so often looking at the other areas in which one's not working, or getting different perspectives on the area in which one is working is still useful. But the simple answer is yes, it's definitely designed with you in mind.
Wonderful. So this is Charles, I believe, has an offer, but he's a question about the RICS qualification. At what point do I get a RICS counsellor? Say if I'm recording my experience while studying.
Right.
So yeah, it's the support from RICS.
Okay. So the short answer is as soon as possible. Then, if you are in if you're in a real estate organisation or in real estate employment already, then your counsellor and your diary are kind of coincidental. They have to broadly happen at the same time, because you need somebody to sign off your experience to confirm that you have done whatever it is you say you've done. So in essence, if you're going to register for your APC with the RICS, do find yourself a counsellor at the same time.
Thank you. So Ahmed wants to know, would this program, I'll answer this, be beneficial for someone that comes from an architectural design background? Yes, I would. I'd say yes, Mark. Any issues with that? Come on, apply. No, it's free to apply.
Yes is quite good. You know, be careful. I'm a lecturer. I never use one word where 10 will do. So let's stick with yes.
So from Spencer, do you know how many people manage doing the course whilst running a full-time business, working full-time? I believe this is most of the cohort, Mark, or
That's
quite a
exactly
lot.
right. Certainly a good proportion. Yes. I would say at least 50% of the students this year, I'm trying to think, across the cohorts, and indeed last year, the students I'm teaching, yes, I would say at least 50% of students are working full-time, or you know, as you say, running their own business, or you know, have substantial commitments outside the course. So it is, and they seem to manage it. I think the key, if I can put a plug out there for online study and ways of making it work, is to try and set aside consistent time and try and work on it consistently. But if you know, if you're doing it in bite-sized chunks or longer chunks, it's whatever works best for you. So and you know, if you want to have a chat about that, we're open to having a conversation about, you know, how to make a study work around your other commitments. But in principle, yes, I would say that's a very common situation.
And I believe, Mark, you can pause the studies, and from starting, you can take a maximum of 5 years. So if you want to pause after a unit and you pick up the next intake, that's appropriate as well.
That's a good point. Yes, yes, you can. So so you can take what's called an interruption, which is essentially put a pin in your studies, take a break, and then come back and take the pin out and pick up where you left off. The only limitation to that is how often the units run and where you want to plug back in. But apart from that, yes, absolutely.
And I believe once you're on the course, that would be a query you direct to the study advisor that you're assigned to once they start and enroll.
Absolutely.
Right. Before I forget, I had an inquiry about the optional units. This was emailed in.
Yes.
One of our prospects really likes the look of all the optional units. Is there a possibility to gain access, or how is there anything? How can you answer that?
Well, that is a great question. The honest answer is I'm not sure. There is certainly theoretically an audit option. In other words, an option in theory for someone to be able to have, if you like, read-only access to a unit that they're not actually studying. But in this particular situation, I don't know. I'm going to have to look into it. I think if you wouldn't mind leaving it with me.
Theoretically, yeah.
And Rebecca, would you be kind enough to remind me of that, because I shall probably forget otherwise.
I will do.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have more questions coming in.
Sure.
So we have a registered architect based in St. Kitts. Hello, Dexter. With interest in becoming a valuer. What are the possibilities for me to do the masters while gaining 2-year practical experience? Considering that we don't have many RICS qualified individuals here, what would be my quickest path considering this limitation?
Okay, that's a really good point. Without knowing your specific circumstances, one of the things I should say is someone else asked a question about the counsellor, the person who oversees your experience. Now, in theory anyway, the person in your organisation doesn't have to be a chartered surveyor necessarily. There are other, so to give you an example, some years ago I had 2 students who set up their own business, finding and assembling sites for development, but they worked with a firm of architects, and the RICS allowed them to be overseen by the firm of architects they were working with, in the sense that they worked closely enough together so they could oversee their experience. The problem, of course, is if you have a limited number of valuers in your locality, is how you get the right experience and therefore move towards qualification. To which I would say that's probably a conversation beyond this this forum, except to say one thing. You can qualify as a registered valuer through more than one route. So I'm an APC assessor. In other words, I assess the final assessment of APCs across 2 routes: valuation, because that happens to be my sort of traditionally core subject, but also commercial real estate. Okay, and as long as you do valuation to the third level of competence, that's level 3, there's a potential for you to become a registered valuer, even if you don't go through the valuation route. What does that mean? It means that you could get broader experience as long as you do valuation as well and still qualify. So I think that's what I would say here. But again, I think it probably sounds like something it might be worth having a separate conversation about, so that we can try and look at the best way forward. Certainly the RICS have got quite good at putting people in touch with worldwide contacts who might be able to help support their APC along the way. So I'm happy to have the conversation, but I probably need to know more about your individual circumstances and probably have a chat with the RICS.
Thank you. So Charles again has asked, I think I can answer this one. Can someone take 2 optional units in the second year, i.e. real estate modelling and corporate real estate? We might have to come back to that about the theoretical of what's it called? Auditing, one of the courses. But there are set unit start dates, isn't they? So it's not just all online for you, because they have to consider the marketing assessments and resources for that. That's why they have set start dates throughout the year.
Absolutely.
Oh, and what date does the course start, and when is the first payment instalment? I can answer this. I believe teaching starts on the 2nd of September this year. So if you don't get your application in before the early application deadline on the 24th of June, please get your application in early August at the latest, to give admissions time to enroll, time for you to register a student. Now, when you register a student, that is when you will be in touch or be able to set up payment plans for those instalments with tuition fees at manchester.ac.uk. Refer back to the slide earlier. But that's our specialist finance team who deals with that part, I'm afraid.
Just one small thing to add, if I may, Rebecca. Just in that first week, there will be an online induction as well. So
yeah.
That first week is quite a busy week, but after that things settle down a bit.
And that's with the admissions team and the study advisors as well. So it's important to get to them, to get to know the study advisors as well. Yeah, put out what you're getting. I love the University of Manchester. So what other questions we have? So with an undergraduate civil engineering and postgraduate in project management, how will masters in real estate? Oh, the question's been missed off. I'm sorry, let's move on to the next one, to Lolly. Will we get technical help for the instalment of online sessions, study materials? Yes, there is IT support as well as the study on the study advisors. And that should be all covered in the induction, won't it, Mark?
Yeah, it will, but I should probably say something about, just to clarify something about study, because this is not quite like a traditional master's or indeed undergraduate program, in the sense that technically, and I say the word technically, all the information you need is online. In other words, the learning packages that you study have all the content you need. So actually your contact with colleagues, with staff, will not be lectures, they're recorded, will not be sort of specific. What happens is each tutor is available for 2 hours a week, okay, for you to drop in and discuss anything you want about the unit. So it's not a taught thing where we sit here and talk at you. It's for you to ask us questions, or explore issues, or whatever it is you want to do with us during that 2-hour block. And as many or as few of you want to come along can do so. So that the face-to-face bit, and of course there'll be online, email support and so on. But what I'm saying is, it's not like a traditional study where you come in for a lecture and then, or a tutorial or whatever. This is we call them drop-ins, because basically different people work through the material at their own speed. So one person could be working on the material from week 2, where another one is working on the material from week 4. And we're happy to have a conversation about any of that to help you with the point that you're at in your study. But what that does mean is all the Well, the traditional teaching is recorded, and then it's the interaction that takes place online in real time. Sorry, Rebecca, I just wanted to make that clear.
That's great. It's great seeing you. Okay, so another question, just wanted to check if gaining experience in an architectural firm as an architect would qualify as well for RICS, RICS, or has it to be fully in a real estate firm?
Normally, it will be the latter.
Ah,
But there are a number of different pathways. And in fact, the RICS is currently reviewing its pathways to qualification. So the honest answer is, as far as I know, not at the moment, or at least not on its own, but it might be possible to combine it with, you know, if you could get seconded to somewhere for a month or two or something, that might be possible. But at the moment, the answer is probably not on its own, but it might be possible to combine it with something else. So again, probably another conversation to have offline when I know exactly what you do. And then I can kind of talk you through the different pathways that might be appropriate.
I think I have two more questions, and then we should be wrapping up. But we have had one posted by an anonymous in the Q bot, which I understand. They've noticed the price for the course seems to be higher compared to other universities. Is there a reason for this? E.g., include a direct to RICS membership. My answer is that we believe we are competitive and we have one price point, because we are a global international course, so we want it to be fair. Mark?
I think that sums it up pretty well. In fact, I'm going
Okay.
to the question slightly in that I don't have a lot of influence over fees, so I'm not sure I have a lot to add except exactly what you said, Rebecca.
Yeah, as resources.
Yeah.
I think, oh, my other question, my final question, Mark, I believe this year you were on sabbatical and your colleagues were looking after the course for you.
Yes.
And for the courses. Oh, and what did you get up to?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. You might not be, but I'm glad you asked me that. So I'm really interested. Okay, I like games, online games, board games, you
You're
name it.
human
I
too,
like.
Mark. I love it.
So what I wanted to look into was gamification in education. In fact, by the time you get to the corporate real estate unit, if you choose that as an option, there may well be some gamified elements in it. But basically, I was looking at two things. One is using the sort of mechanics of games to enhance engagement and enjoyment of learning. So, you know, things like points and badges and streaks and all that sort of thing. But the other aspect was like a strong narrative or story through the unit, so that, you know, when you're asking questions or working on problems, that they're brought to life more by a kind of a rich environment in which they're presented, and that you're building on different things from week to week. So you make decisions in week one, and that has an influence over the results you get in week two, which might influence. So I was looking at both of those, and I have to say it was really good fun. But essentially, I'm hoping it will feed into my teaching over the next, well, year or two.
I think that just illustrates the quality of the teaching at the University of Manchester, that that academics such as yourself get the opportunity to pursue your passions and bring that into the learning as well. It's such a good environment.
Hey, who'd have thought? It's brilliant.
My dissertation was actually on Lego and the child in art history.
It's okay. I won't diverge too much, but interestingly, I had conversations about Lego in the classroom. I had conversations about Monopoly in the classroom, all sorts of things. In fact, I'm working with a colleague from the business school who uses what should we call it, proprietary games, so commercially produced games in her teaching, and we're doing a reciprocal arrangement. So I'm assessing her students and their experience of games, and she's going to assess mine, because it's very difficult to assess your own students and be unbiased. So yeah, we're having lots of fun. But it's funny you should mention Lego. If you could see my study, you'd see lots of Lego. around my study. Anyway.
I bet there's a Death Star in there somewhere.
It's in the cupboard.
I knew it. Okay, well, I think we'll have a scour through the chat afterwards to make sure we've answered all your questions, and if not, we'll try and follow up directly. I think that's it, really. I'll just my final slide is just to say thank you so much for joining. We've covered a lot of ground today, discussing a little bit about online learning, the real estate master's course, and the RICS, the RICS qualification process. Remember, you can find more resources on our website, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Again, study online at manchester.ac.uk. And we do appreciate those of you who have joined from different time zones. Your input and participation today has been invaluable. Really, thank you very much for the questions. We look forward to welcoming you in September. So stay safe and take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.